Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by Hooters. I'm Jamie, that's Heath, and we have a special guest joining us today, live from Sleepy Hollow, New York. It's the great, the wonderful, our podcast host, Adam Azer. Adam, how you doing today, bud?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on. Excited to talk about bad draft picks. That's what I'm here for.
That's right. We're talking BUSTS now here on Fantasy Football Today on CBS Sports HQ. We're going to start with the quarterback position. And Adam, you got a big name that's a bust. A lot of people look at this guy as number one, maybe overall pick if you're so inclined to take quarterbacks. We don't do that. You don't do that. Tell us why Patrick Mahomes could be a bad player for 2019.
No, don't frame it like that. He won't be a bad player. He'll be a very good player. But I think he's going 17th now in CBS Sports ADP. A little bit later, if you look at fantasyfootballcalculator.com, I'm not taking him until round 4. So we've got to be close to 40 picks in before I'm considering Patrick Mahomes. I just don't see that much separation between Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, and Andrew Luck. I know there was last year. There's a pretty long history of quarterbacks having a career season and producing very well the next year, but significantly worse. Peyton Manning, the latest example, 2013, almost 5,500 yards, 55 touchdowns, and he went from QB1 that year to QB4 behind Andrew Luck, Aaron Rodgers, and Drew Brees. So I just think that if you draft Patrick Mahomes a lot earlier than you draft those other three, you're going to be disappointed, and you're going to be leaving some very good players, off your team at running back and wide receiver that you could be taking in the earlier rounds.
Yes, always about the average draft position. And again, Mahomes going too soon. I am in total agreement with you, and I know you are as well, Heath. It's just you got to take him in the right spot. And I think a lot of people just get overexcited about 50 and 5,000. It's understandable, but pump the brakes. Just be a little bit cautious about where you're taking Mahomes. Your bust at quarterback is?
Adam is not going to agree with it because it is Drew Brees. And I just look at what happened with him last year. We've seen now 3 years in a row the pass volume is decreasing. They are going a little bit more run heavy. And part of that's because their defense has just gotten a lot better. They made a lot of really good draft picks on the defensive side of the ball. Brees last year was sustained as a top 12 quarterback by an abnormally high touchdown rate and 4 or 5 rushing touchdowns. I don't expect 4 rushing touchdowns from a quarterback with Drew Brees' athleticism. I think that drops to 1 or 2. I think you probably see the pass touchdowns drop around 26, 27. He still may be a borderline number 1 guy. I've got him ranked 15th, but there's like 5 fantasy points difference between 11th and 15th. Unfortunately, he's being drafted as the 7th or 8th quarterback off the board. There's just no reason to take him when you can get someone just like him or better in one of the last rounds of the draft.
A lot of people are shocked when I say that I would take Kyler Murray over Drew Brees, but go back to 2017 when he was under 25 passing touchdowns. That's a little bit alarming for somebody who you're hoping to be, like you said, his ADP as a top 7 quarterback. I'm going a little bit similar in that regard with Big Ben because I expect a little bit of a fall off. No Antonio Brown. For what it's worth, no Jesse James. He's replaceable, but I think you look at Brown, 15 touchdowns. I'm hopeful for James Washington, Dante Moncrief, Deontay Johnson, Vance McDonald. A lot of parts you're having to put together here to get to that number, and it could happen. But I also look at, I think they want to be a little bit better running the ball. We know James Conner had a big season, but it was sort of segmented. Good games, a few mediocre games. I also think better defense for the Steelers, so I don't think they're going to have to rely on Big Ben leading the NFL in pass attempts like he did a year ago. So I love Roethlisberger still as a good quarterback. I think he can still be a good fantasy quarterback. But you said it. It's a deep position. When you see me having him ranked 16th, it's not that I think he can't be a number 1 quarterback. It's just there are other guys that I like better. I know you, however, differ. As you see, you have him ranked 8th.
Yeah, I don't know how much better the defense is going to be. They should be a little bit better. They shouldn't be as bad as they were in the second half. But I still think the offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh is going to call a lot of pass plays. That's what Ben Roethlisberger likes to do. And most importantly, he loves to call those plays in the red zone. So I think the touchdowns will still be there. I have taken 2 to 3 pass attempts per game away from him. Maybe I should take 4 or 5, but still I have him projected for the most pass attempts in the NFL. I think he's one of the more likely guys to throw for 4,800 yards. The touchdowns should be there. He's not as good in 4-point per pass touchdown leagues because he's not going to run at all. But the thing that I love about him is I get him in our drafts in the 13th or 14th round. Nobody's taking him, so I'm fine with it.
It's going to be interesting to see. And again, like you said, his ADP is falling. So if you are inclined to wait for Roethlisberger, you should be in good shape. All right, Adam, tell me why I'm crazy for having Odell Beckham and Adam Thielen as busts. I just look at it, average draft position. They're great players. I think they're going to put up good numbers, but a little bit unrealistic. Beckham right now going as a top 10 overall player on CBS Sports average draft position. Adam Thielen, I've seen in some cases going as a second-round pick in PPR. I'm nervous about those guys going in the spots that they are, given the circumstances. Beckham not necessarily going to get, I think, 160 targets like he's used to, and Thielen looking at it from the standpoint of the Vikings want to run the ball.
My issue with Beckham has nothing to do with the targets. It's just the injuries. I think he's a pretty injury-prone player. We've seen it. So I'm a little nervous about him in the first round. I think once you get to about 4 or 5 picks into the second round, it's fine to take Odell Beckham, but there are safer wide receivers who also have a ton of upside. Thielen, if he's going in the second round, that's a mistake. The Vikings are going to be more run-heavy. You saw it the final 4 games of the season. Kirk Cousins' pass attempts went way down. Now, it's a little bit difficult, Jamie, to look at what Adam Thielen did in those games and really say, it's attributed to the change in the offense, because we just don't know how much the injuries mattered. Thielen was playing hurt down the stretch. I have trouble doubting Adam Thielen, because I doubted him last year, and he got off to basically the best start in NFL history. But I think mid to late third round is when I'd be comfortable taking Thielen. Late second round is too early.
Yeah, I think that's just a problem. Again, it's just that I think the expectations are 1,009. Again, I think it's going to come down a little bit, or 1,209 in some cases. So that's my cause for concern with them. It's very similar to what you were saying, Adam, about Mahomes. It's just the expectations. They're great players, but if you just dial back a little bit, I think that's where you want to take a couple of those guys, or those 2 guys in particular. You 2 guys actually share a bust. This is nice to see. So you guys are finally in agreement. So, Adam, I'll give you the first word on Mike Williams. You could follow, and then we'll factor in your other 2 busts at the wide receiver spot.
Well, you're going to like this, and Heath and I don't always agree. I'm going to change my answer on Mike Williams. His ADP on CBS is actually lower than I thought it was. It's in the 70s, and I think that's perfectly fine. I chose Mike Williams as a bust, though, because, I'm used to seeing him go maybe in the mid-50s in ADP. On Fantasy Football Calculator, he's in the 60s. This is specifically for PPR. He just didn't catch a lot of passes last year. Didn't even catch 50 passes. So he had 43 catches for 664 yards and 10 touchdowns. That was without Hunter Henry. I do think his stock goes up if there's a Melvin Gordon holdout, but I think in the 70s, and I'm interested to know what he thinks about that, because that's later than I usually see Mike Williams go. But if his ADP is actually in the 70s, I think that's perfectly fine. 50s and 60s feels a little early.
Yeah, I was looking at NFFC ADP. He was 52nd overall in ADP, an early 5th-round pick, and that's way too soon. He averaged about 40 yards per game last year. And I do think there's room for a little bit of target growth. I don't think with Hunter Henry back there's room for a huge amount of target growth. His touchdown numbers, just like we talk about with Tyler Lockett and Calvin Ridley, those are going to come down. Nobody catches touchdowns at that type of rate. And I don't think he's a 100-target guy. So I like him fine as an upside wide receiver in the 8th round. I'd take him at pick 80. Late 7th round's fine. I wouldn't take him at 74.
The one thing that I like about Mike Williams, there's 110 targets available, and you said it. Hunter Henry's going to get probably the bulk of that, because I think he takes the Tyrell Williams targets.
Right.
If you're looking at it, Antonio Gates and Tyrell Williams, that's the 110 where it comes from. The other part of this, though, is Melvin Gordon's a double-digit touchdown guy. I don't expect even the combination of Austin Eckler and Justin Jackson to rush for double-digit touchdowns if Gordon's holdout lasts. I think it helps Mike Williams because of what he can do in the red zone as that big body target. Same thing with Hunter Henry. So it does come down to, for me, though, where you have to get Mike Williams or maybe where you should let him fall to. That's the interesting part. So you have Cortland Sutton as a bust at wide receiver. Adam, you have Corey Davis, a couple young receivers. Why do you don't like Sutton? And then, Adam, you just follow up with Corey Davis and what his potential could be.
And you might not even think that Cortland Sutton's being drafted high enough. His ADP right now is 90th overall. I think that's too high. I don't like the match of Sutton in this offense or with this quarterback. We did see several years ago Joe Flacco had a good connection with Torrey Smith and liked to throw the deep ball. Last year he did not. He ranked 24th in terms of attempts down the field. He was even worse in terms of deep ball accuracy. He was 34th. So there's only 32 starting quarterbacks. I'm not sure Flacco is still a good deep ball passer, and I think Sutton might be 4th or 5th on this offense in terms of how good he is at running routes within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, where I expect most of the targets to be in the Denver offense.
The one thing, though, would be is John Brown had a great start to the season last year. They're different receivers,
right,
by any stretch. But he did elevate John Brown's game.
John Brown's a good route runner, though.
Oh, sure. I'm not saying, again,
Yeah.
John Brown's a better receiver at this point. You could debate the fantasy value of these two guys. But I think Courtland Sutton is somebody that if you're just hoping for a target boost, just because they're trying to push him to be the #1 guy, then maybe I think that's where the optimism comes from. But I certainly could see the pessimism, especially if Emmanuel Sanders is healthy. Corey Davis, Adam, just to let you know, I'm going to speak for you for a second. Adam has said, do not draft Corey Davis this year. Are you still saying the same thing?
Well, I said that somebody's going to draft him, but it's not going to be me. I just don't understand. And I got to give credit to the CBS drafters, because in CBS ADP, Corey Davis is 119th overall. On Fantasy Football Calculator, he's 101st. By the way, real quick funny story. I was going to go with Courtland Sutton, but I changed it to Corey Davis. So Heath, we could have had a lot in common. But I just don't know what there is to like about Corey Davis. He's got a bad quarterback, at least in terms of passing yards. They have Delaney Walker back. They drafted A.J. Brown. I'm sorry, I just don't see it. There's been so little to go off of in his career, and they're going to be a running team. They have an inexperienced, possibly bad play caller. So I just don't get it. There's other players. 119 overall's, I guess, okay, but 101 overall is too high for him. There are still a lot of good players left on the board. And, yeah, I think Corey Davis is going to end up going down as a major NFL draft bust and fantasy draft bust.
We have some time constraints, so you want to listen to our Fantasy Football Today podcast to get the rebuttal from Heath Cummings on why Corey Davis is not a bust. Let's move on now to running backs here, where we start with Darrell Henderson and Sony Michel. So, Heath, you're looking at two guys here. Michel, we know, dealing with the knee problem, but Henderson, I think, is more of the interesting one. Tell us why you think he could be a bust. Because a lot of people are looking at him and saying Todd Gurley's not going to be 100%. He could be the replacement option.
Well, there are just a lot of different ways that he could be a bust. For one thing, Todd Gurley could just stay healthy. Sean McVay could be telling us the truth right now. Gurley's knee could be fine. He could get 18 touches a game, and then Henderson just doesn't